When I was your age, television was called books.
I'm looking for someone to share in an adventure.
You're going to go on an adventure. You're going to be my burglar. And Bilbo's like, no, I don't want to. But there's something that just pulls him. And I think what does it is that connection to the heroes of the past.
Late for what? I'm going on an adventure!
Hi, welcome to Justin's Morning Coffee. Okay, so it's time for the next plot. Out of the 7 basic plots, we're up to the quest. All right, so Rags to Riches, Overcoming the Monster, Voyage and Return, we have explored. There's certainly more to explore there, but let's move on now to the quest. In Christopher Booker's 7 basic plots. The quest is probably the plot type that most closely adheres to Joseph Campbell's hero's journey. So there's a lot of similarities there, but it is a very popular but yet difficult, I would say, more sophisticated plot type. So if you want to catch up, you can go watch the Rags to Riches, Overcoming the Monster, and Voyage and Return videos, links below. And as a reminder, I plot this out on the 2 mountains of success and legacy. Success and legacy. Rags to Riches is about going from pure potential to competence. Overcoming the Monster is about encountering bullies in the world. Voyage and Return is about renewal when you get tired. Comedy is about finding identity. It goes from confusion to clarity. Tragedy is about making mistakes. And then the quest. We finally wind up with the quest. I haven't covered comedy and tragedy yet because those are massive undertakings. And so today we'll do the quest. Basically, the way I see it is it's more of a midlife story, and I'll kind of explain why I think that's the case in a little bit. But what it is, I think, is the bridge between the 2 mountains, the bridge from success to legacy. So think of it this way. Let's say you graduate college, you pick a career, you accomplish all these things that the previous plots were dealing with. You've sort of found your identity, you've found your place in the world, and you've carved out a measure of comfort for yourself. But really the problem then is, what does it all mean? What does your accomplishes mean? How does it connect to the larger purposes in the world, larger purposes in the cosmos? And so that's, I think, what the quest is about. It's about finding that treasure, finding that elixir, finding that boon. All of these different story theorists, they have different words for it, but it's basically finding that little bit of insight, that little bit of revelation, whatever you want to call it, and bringing that to the community. And that's I think what connects you from success to legacy. There's certainly the case that some people, I think, don't make it from this mountain to this mountain. They don't make it from the mountain of success to the mountain of legacy. And I think that's what this story is about. Okay, so it's a very popular plot. We've got Search for the Holy Grail, The Hobbit, Finding Nemo, Treasure Island, Raiders of the Lost Ark, Watership Down, Dante's Divine Comedy, Pilgrim's Progress, The Odyssey, Maltese Falcon, if you want to go into the noir world. So you can pretty much find all of the genres here. You can find westerns, you can find fantasy epics, you can find adventure, you can find cartoons, you can find film noir. Jules Verne is a perfect example. People are always going on quests in Jules Verne novels, so Around the World in 80 Days. The Great Escape. There's a lot of World War II. World War II stories are a nice setting for the plot. This plot type. The Great Escape is one of them. Field of Dreams, if you want sports movies, really lend themselves to this plot as well. And Princess Bride, if you want to have a comedic version of that. Okay, so let's take a look at the 5 acts. What I want to do today is I want to just deal with the very, very first part, the anticipation stage. There's a lot of background for each one, so it may take a few videos to get through all of this here. But so basically, these are the same 5 acts that we saw before in the other plot types: anticipation, dream, frustration, nightmare, and conclusion. Okay, so I think this is a really, really helpful way to kind of categorize and break up the plot. So the anticipation stage. a shadow looms, a need arises, and there's a call to adventure, and then a refusal of the call. Okay. Then you get into the dream stage where the call to adventure is accepted, and you start the journey, and you have challenges and tests. Booker describes it in terms of tension and restriction. So it's sort of like an adventure and then a little period of rest, and an adventure and then a little period of rest and respite. Frustration stage is when the setbacks and obstacles become larger and more consequential. The nightmare stage is when the greatest fear and ordeal of the journey happens. This is the full forces of antagonism are now directed at you. And then the return home is where you take that elixir, that treasure, that insight, that valuable thing that you gained in the journey, and bring it back to the community. So you can see, this is, those of you that are familiar with Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey, this is going to be very close to that. Okay, so let's just start with the anticipation stage. Now, the anticipation stage is the ordinary world. That's the screenwriting term for the state of affairs that we find at the beginning of the story. Now, the reason why I think this matters is because each plot type is going to have a very distinct setting out of which the need for that story arises. So if you remember, Overcoming the Monster starts with a Sabbath rest, a little place of tranquility, of habitable order, and then the threat comes from the outside. The monster comes from the outside. The Voyage and Return plot starts with a sense of weariness, a sense of staleness, a sense of boredom, a sense of sleepiness, and then there needs to be a dream that will renew your sense for life. So in The Quest, like I said, I sort of see it as a midlife story. This is, again, I'm going to go back here. This is someone who's probably already had their rags to riches story. They've already accomplished something in life. They've already had an Overcoming the Monster or two. They've already encountered bullies in their life. They've probably already had a Voyage and Return, and possibly even already a comedy and a tragedy. So where are they in their life journey when these characters start to begin their quest story? All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at Bilbo, Christian from Bilbo from The Hobbit, Christian from Pilgrim's Progress, and then Kevin Costner here from Field of Dreams. So in order to understand, again, we're just looking at the ordinary world. What is the ground out of which this story will sprout? What's the need? What do you need for background information in order for the quest to be ready to be deployed in someone's life? So I think the opening to Field of Dreams is a perfect example of that. So let's take a look at that now.
My father's name was John Kinsella. He settled in Chicago, where he quickly learned to live and die with the White Sox. He played in the minors for a year or two, but nothing ever came of it. Married Mom in '38. Mom died when I was 3, and I suppose Dad did the best he could. I was put to bed at night to stories of Babe Ruth and the great shoeless Joe Jackson. Dad was a Yankees fan then, so of course I rooted for Brooklyn. And when it came time to go to college, I picked the farthest one from home I could find. Annie and I got married in June of '74. Then Annie got the crazy idea that she could talk me into buying a farm. I'm 36 years old, I love baseball, and I'm about to become a farmer. But until I heard the voice, I'd never done a crazy thing in my whole life.
Okay, so until he heard the voice, he had never done a crazy thing in his whole life. But see what I mean here? It showed basically a really quick boom, boom, boom version. He'd already done his Rags to Riches plot. He'd already probably done his Overcoming the Monster plot. And then he'd already done his comedy because he met his wife. So he found his place. He's a farmer in Iowa. That's his place. But now the question is, how do you connect these accomplishments, finding who you are, having a career, starting a family, having a farm, all that stuff, to meaning? Now, I think that's kind of what it's about. So now if we look at the opening of The Pilgrim's Progress, it really isn't a great movie, but I'm just going to read to you the beginning of it. As I walked through the wilderness of this world, I lighted on a certain place where as a den, and I laid me down in that place to sleep, and I slept, and I dreamed a dream. I dreamed, and behold, I saw a man clothed with rags, a book in his hand, and a great burden on his back. I looked, and I saw him open the book and read therein. And as he read, he wept and trembled, and not being able to longer to contain, he brake out with a lamentable cry, saying, What shall I do? Okay, so that's where we start off. He's got a family. He lives in, he's got a home, he's got a family, he's got probably a job, but he's got this burden. And so this now provides the need for him to go on this adventure. Now I want to show you, I'm going to read another passage which isn't in the movie from the book of The Hobbit, J.R.R. Tolkien's The Hobbit, which kind of gives you that same sense. There's some kind of a need for a story to take place. There's this little moment here that I think that I remember when I read this when I was a kid in The Hobbit. I thought, what does he mean by that? What does Tolkien mean by that? It's in the beginning, and the dwarves have just arrived, and Bilbo is hosting them. And then Tolkien says this: the dark came into the room from the little window that opened in the side of the hill. The firelight flickered. It was April, and still they played on, while the shadow of Gandalf's beard wagged against the wall. And then listen to this. The dark filled all the room, and the fire died down, and the shadows were lost, and still they played on. And suddenly first one and then another began to sing as they played, deep-throated singing of the dwarves in the deep places of their ancient homes. So the dark filled the room. It's not, now how would you normally write that? You would normally say the light left the room, right? Because darkness is the absence of light. You wouldn't say that the darkness came in through the window. So isn't that interesting? The darkness came in through the window. And so I think you'll find this two motifs, right? One is what we saw in Field of Dreams, which is he was told stories at night of the heroes of old. But in this case, because it's a baseball movie, who is it? Babe Ruth, Shoeless Joe Jackson, all of the heroes of old, right? Now, what happens with Bilbo, right? He gets sung. They're singing songs of these legends, okay? So there's some kind of connection, I think, between a shadow over the current world and then the heroes of the past. And there's this awakening of the imagination, awakening of the spirit of adventure with the stories of the heroes of old, or the saints of old, you might say. And so what does that remind you of? Booker says that the story of Exodus in the Old Testament is an example of the quest story. So you have all the elements there. You've got your middle-aged hero, and then you've got the darkness, the background of some kind of a threat, some kind of a darkness that comes in through the window, as in Bilbo's case, or the city of destruction, as in Christian's case, which is the Egyptians enslaving the Jews. And then comes this call, this, in Kevin Costner's case, voice. In Christian's case, the evangelist. In Bilbo's case, it will be Gandalf. But basically, what is that? That's the burning bush. This is the I am that I am. The voice coming out of the bush, the ground of existence being itself, calling now the hero to this task, to this mission, to this adventure. Right. And what does the voice say? What does the I am say to Moses in that scene in the Bible? He says, I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, right? So in Kevin Costner's case, the voice is the God of Babe Ruth, Shoeless Joe Jackson, and Ty Cobb, you might say. In Bilbo's case, Gandalf is a friend of his ancestors, the old Took, so there's this kind of sort of sense of a connection to the heroes of the past, the stories of the past, the quest adventures of the past.
He charged the goblin ranks. He swung his club so hard, it knocked the goblin king's head clean off, and it sailed 100 yards through the air and went down
the call that comes into that environment that says, okay, you're halfway through your journey of life, like it says in Dante, midway through the journey of life, I found myself in a dark wood. I had lost the path, and then here comes Virgil. Okay, so this is the burning bush motif. So I think that's a really, really good way to think of the call and the refusal of the call in the quest story. So to start off talking about the burning bush, let's look at how the call happens in The Hobbit.
Good morning.
What do you mean? Do you mean to wish me a good morning, or do you mean that it is a good morning whether I want it or not? Or perhaps you mean to say that you feel good on this particular morning?
All of them at once, I suppose.
I'm looking for someone to share in an adventure.
Now, I don't imagine anyone west of Bree would have much interest in adventures.
Nasty, disturbing, uncomfortable things.
Good morning.
You've changed.
I'm sorry, do I know you?
But I'm Gandalf, and Gandalf means me.
All right. So he's looking for someone to share in an adventure. And of course, Bilbo doesn't want any part in an adventure. Those nasty things. He's sort of he's in his world of comfort. You know, he's got everything organized. He's got everything there. And why does the burning bush come into your reality at this point? Why does Gandalf decide, I'm going to choose Bilbo to be the burglar? Isn't that an interesting question? That the call comes from the outside to someone who is reluctant. Why? Well, I mean, it's hard to go on to go on adventures. There's the great line when Bilbo starts out on the journey in the old animated 1970 version, and he's going, bacon and eggs, bacon and eggs.
Eggs and bacon, a good full pipe, my garden at twilight.
You know, he just wants comfort. He just wants to go back to his house. He doesn't want to be out there in the cold and the rain and everything. So Gandalf here, what does Gandalf represent? He is the spirit of wisdom, the sort of guiding spirit, the benevolent old man, and he does fireworks. So there's the sense of fire. The burning bush, fire, fireworks. This is wisdom coming from above. You know, so I think there's a reason why the call often comes from a bearded old man, and why there is an association with fire, revelation or fire, right? Okay, so now let's take a look at how it happens, how the call happens in Field of Dreams.
Annie, what was that?
What was what?
That voice just now. What was it?
We didn't hear anything.
All right.
If you build it, he will come.
Hey, are you really hearing voices?
Just one.
Okay, so he's going out into the cornfield, and then he hears this mysterious voice. So there's always a sense of the voice, the call. You know, it comes from the beyond. It comes from above. It comes from the spirit of wisdom in the world. It comes from God. It comes from some higher place. Because the only thing that can really call you into a task that you have to do is obviously something higher than you. It can't come from within you. It has to come from without. So I think that's the idea here. All right, so now let's take another look at the sense of the call, and this is going to be from a Steven Spielberg film called, of course you know this, Close Encounters of a Third Kind. So here's Close Encounters.
A34, A34.
Okay, so he has no idea what that is. But there's a sense that we've got this voice coming out of the cornfield. We've got an old wise man coming and saying, would you like to go on an adventure? We've got Christian who finds this book that talks about the destruction of his city and the need to escape. And then you've got this alien light coming from above. So I want to read you something from the beginning, the very, very beginning of Dante's Divine Comedy, to sort of show that all of these stories are all in the sort of, they're starting again out of the same family of starting places, the same sort of sprouting out of the same soil. So here's a little passage from Dante. Okay, so in Canto 1 of the Inferno, Dante Alighieri, 1265. Midway upon the journey of our life, so that's the same as Kevin Costner, the same as Richard Dreyfuss in Close Encounters, the same as Bilbo in The Hobbit. Midway upon the journey of our life, I found myself within a forest dark, for the straightforward pathway had been lost. Right, so that's what you see with Richard Dreyfuss. He's got the map. He's in a dark, he's driving around in the dark area. These metaphors, I think these metaphors really matter. Okay, it's sunset, and he's in Field of Dreams, and he's wandering through the cornfield. Okay, so there's this sense of being lost, and so Dante continues. Ah me, how hard a thing it is to say.
I cannot well recount how I entered the wood. So long had it been since I abandoned the true way.
He's at the base of a mountain. He's lost the path. So look at all of the metaphors that have piled up here. Losing the path, falling asleep, losing your way, not having a map, dark forest. So it's this kind of sense of not being connected to the ultimate meaning of things, not being connected to the telos of things, you might say. And so then from that, in that state, in that sort of desert state, that lost state, that, not being on the right path state, or wondering if you're on the right path, maybe wondering why the path that you chose earlier in life didn't exactly lead to where you thought it would lead. That's the mental state out of which this story arises. All right, so we've got Kevin Costner in the cornfield. We've got Christian in the city of destruction. We've got Bilbo being confronted by Gandalf. We've got Dante in the dark wood, and we've got Richard Dreyfuss seeing the burning bush. Okay, so what do? First, we already saw it with Bilbo. He refuses the call. Okay, there's always this sort of sense of unwillingness to go on the adventure. There's a sense that you want to just, even though you know that your life isn't everything it could be, even though you know that there's more to accomplish out there, there's a need for whatever it is that you need to do, whatever your calling is, you need to do it, but you don't want to. So that's why I think in this story there's a pushback that the protagonist has against this mentor character. It wants to remain in stagnation, remain in stasis, you might say. Okay, so in order to understand that, let's take a look now at the beginning of the great Rob Reiner movie, The Princess Bride, everyone's favorite childhood movie. And even here, you have the mentor character in the form of an old man telling the protagonist that they should go on an adventure, and the protagonist saying what? No, I don't want to. Okay, so let's take a look at that.
Guess what? Your grandfather's here.
Hey, I brought you a special present.
A book?
When I was your age, television was called books. It was the book my father used to read to me when I was sick, and today I'm going to read it to you. Revenge, giants, monsters, miracles.
I'll try and stay awake.
Your vote of confidence is overwhelming. The Princess Bride. Buttercup was raised on a small farm in the country of Florin.
Okay, so you can see how, even if you're doing a modern movie, even if you're doing something that's a little outside the box. You're not following the formula exactly. See how they still had a call and a refusal of the call in that opening scene. So in this case, if you were to look at the story of Wesley and Humperdinck and all the characters within the book, you're not going to find that very, very specific call and refusal of the call. However, what you will find is if you start at the beginning of the movie, that's exactly what you get with the child and the grandfather. So you basically have this same scene, but played out in that sort of creative way. So that's why I find it so helpful to understand the way that these archetypes function, because you sort of get the sense it's like everyone sort of just figures, oh, yeah, we need that little part in there in order for it to make sense. So we start with the child who's sick. Grandfather comes in. Do you want to go on an adventure in the form of reading this book? No, I don't want to. And then he convinces him, and finally he says, okay. Right. So it's sort of the same idea here. All right. So that gets us up from the ordinary world. The shadow looms over the peace and tranquility of the land, and then the burning bush moment, the Gandalf moment, the call, and the refusal of the call. Okay. So the next part is supernatural aid. So now there's got to be, and this is what happens in the book of Exodus, if you remember. So Moses approaches the burning bush. The burning bush says, I am that I am. This is Yahweh. This is existence himself. This is God talking through the bush, the ground of all existence, calling him to an adventure. Okay, that's the ultimate version of this story, right? So in Field of Dreams, that's personified with the voice. So you can take all these things: the wise old man, the alien, the grandfather, the burning bush. That's God, basically. That's what it is in the story. And so what has to happen is the hero has to be convinced that they need to go on this adventure. And one of the ways that happens is with supernatural aid, with miracles. Basically, you might say the voice, the burning bush, needs to sort of prove that, yes, this is indeed existence itself that's calling you. This is indeed the divine that is calling you. And so, of course, in the story of Moses, there are miracles that are performed. Take your staff, throw it down, it's going to be turned into a snake. He does it. Sure enough, it turns into a snake. Pick up the tail of the snake and it will become your staff again. Sure enough, he picks it up, becomes his staff again. Okay, so let's look now at Close Encounters of the Third Kind and see how the voice basically convinces him that this is a journey that he needs to go on.
Wake up. No, listen, Ronnie, it was a red whoosh. You know those pictures in the National Geographic about the aurora borealis? This is better than that.
All right, so Richard Dreyfuss sees the initial shock, like Dante, looking up at the top of the mountain, like just a glimpse, Field of Dreams, a voice, and then a miracle, and then he follows it, he sees the light, no, unmistakable, all right. I wasn't dreaming. There are other witnesses around. We saw this thing, and he's got sunburn on the side of his face, and then he comes and he tells his wife, and she's like, "What are you talking about? What are you talking about?" Right. So I think there's a sense that in order for the status quo to be changed, there needs to be a little bit of interjection of the supernatural. So there's a sense that in order for the status quo, which is Pharaoh ruling over the Israelites, there's got to be a miracle. There's got to be a plague. There's got to be, some kind of divine intervention in order for that to happen. And so this call, comes from the divine, you might say. Okay, so you're going to notice these beats are so similar. So now let's take a look at Field of Dreams, the same little section from Field of Dreams.
If you build what, who will come?
He didn't say.
I hate it when that happens.
Me too. I got some errands to do in town.
Hey! What if the voice calls while you're gone?
Take a message. I was wondering if I was doing something wrong or something. Did you ever hear voices out there?
Who's hearing voices?
Ray is. No, I'm not. Noises. I'm just gonna get some 3-in-1 oil and that ought to do it. I'm 36 years old. I have a wife and I'm scared to death I'm turning into my father. I never forgave him for getting old. He must have had dreams. We never did anything about him. I may have even heard voices too, but he sure didn't listen to them. Annie, I'm afraid of that happening to me. And something tells me that this may be my last chance to do something about it.
If you really feel you should do this, then you should do it.
Okay, interesting. All right, so remember what I said about the idea that the quest is the bridge from the first mountain to the second mountain. Success to legacy, right? So there's always this sense of the relationship to the Father. You know, that's the whole beginning of the prologue in Field of Dreams. The idea that there's something to do with going from one generation to another. The value that you get from accomplishments in life, how do you pass it on? And so there's a connection to the future, connecting to the future, and then connecting to the past. So there's this kind of bridge-like metaphor between the wisdom of the past, your current time right now, and the future. I think there's something to do with that. Now, remember I said, the idea of the alien in Close Encounters, the voice in Field of Dreams, Gandalf, the wise old man, all this stuff has to do with the burning bush moment, So what exactly is the burning bush? Now here's a very interesting icon. This is the Theotokos in Greek Orthodox theology. And within the burning bush, you have the Christ child and the Theotokos, Mary. So what is that about? So there's a sense that call, okay, it has pregnant within it the value of the future. It's like a little seed that says, if you build it, something will manifest. If you go on this journey, something is going to be born out of this. So it's kind of like a little womb, So I think that's why these ancient artists would associate the womb of Mary that contains the seed of the Christ child, the Savior of the world, the ultimate value, the Logos, and the burning bush. So that there's a sense that they're thematically tied together. And so it's like you're taking in the seed, which is a plan. That's kind of what the call is. It's like, all right, we don't know exactly what you're supposed to build or who is coming, right? But it's like, it's compressed, You're told basically at the beginning of the movie, you're told what's going to happen. He's going to build it and he will come. That's what's going to happen. Moses is told, you're going to go talk to Pharaoh, and then the people are going to get let go, and then they're going to be taken to the promised land. But it's all compressed, and it's a promise of an adventure, like Gandalf says to Bilbo. You're going to go on an adventure. You're going to be my burglar, and Bilbo's like, no, I don't want to. But there's something that just pulls him, and I think what does it is that connection to the past, the heroes of the past. So Kevin Costner's talking about Serious Joe Jackson. Did you know that Babe Ruth copied his swing? Right, that this is a legend. This is a saint, a hero. And so there's that sense of in the Bible, it's the patriarchs. I am the God of what? What does he say? Of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So again, it's this connection to the past. And the heroes of the past, that's what overcomes, I think, what overcomes that resistance at first on the behalf of the protagonist. That and the actual spiritual, supernatural demonstration of the power of the voice, of the power of the alien, of the power of the wizard. Okay, so let's see. I think we can look at one more example.
Yes, the museum will buy them as usual, no questions asked. Yes, they are nice. But the model I brought are important and they're waiting. With Army intelligence.
What do I want to see them for? What am I?
Professor of Archaeology, obtainer of rare antiquities.
Yesterday afternoon, European sections intercepted a German communique that was...
You see, over the last 2 years, the Nazis have had teams of archaeologists running for all kinds of religious artifacts.
Tanis Development, Staff of Ra.
Nazis have discovered Tanis.
Yeah, the Ark of the Covenant, the actual 10 Commandments.
You guys ever go to Sunday school?
Well,
obviously, the Nazis are looking for the headpiece to the Staff of Ra.
What exactly is a headpiece to the Staff of Ra?
It's a cap, an elaborate headpiece. And if you put the staff in a certain place and made a beam that came down on the floor here and gave you the exact location of the Well of the Souls. That's it.
Good God.
Yes, that's just what the Hebrews thought.
Now, what's that supposed to be coming out of there?
Lightning. Power of God or something.
The Bible speaks of the Ark leveling mountains.
Okay, so that was Indiana Jones' Raiders of the Lost Ark. So you can see how, even though you don't have Gandalf showing up with an old white beard, with his call, you still do have the mystical, spiritual element, the awe and reverence, the supernatural element, right? So you had the supernatural element with, if you build it, he will come. You had the supernatural element of the aliens showing up in Close Encounters of the Third Kind. You've got the supernatural element of Pilgrim's Progress, on and on and on, right? So it doesn't always look the same, but the elements, I think, need to be there. So in this case, there's this awe and reverence for what is the thing of value. So it's sort of like in Treasure Island, or in The Hobbit, where they're basically saying that the adventure is necessary because of this supernatural treasure. So the burning bush element, the promised land element, the treasure element, the supernatural element, all of these things kind of are typical of this plot type. And so that refusal of the call is overcome now with, I think, a sense of awe, right? A sense of this is beyond my understanding. This is beyond my experience, And so those elements are the reference to the heroes of the past, miracles that are manifest in today's world, and then the lure, the call of this treasure. I really think that the gold, the light, the lightning, the crystals, all those things are representative of this kind of spiritual prize that lies at the end of the quest. And what we're going to find out is that spiritual prize that lies at the end of the quest is not just physical gold or physical wealth or riches. It's actually the elixir. It's actually the boon. It represents the insight, the revelation that occurs with this plot type. Okay, so I think you can start to see how some of this is coming together. Now, there's a lot to go through still in this plot type. We've only barely made it 15 minutes into a typical quest film, and we've been talking for a while now. So I'm going to go ahead and release part 1 of the quest. We're going to pick up right from where we left off with the next part next time. Thank you for watching, and please leave a comment, let me know what you think, And I'm still having a lot of fun with this and a lot of fun interacting with you guys. So let me know. All right, bye.